Welcome everybody to the Christine Upchurch Show and the Vibration of Change. So grateful you're joining us here today. I am joining the show from Orcas Island, Washington, which may explain why my video or my audio might not be perfect, but please forgive me, I needed nature. And before I tell you anything about our guest, I want to say hello to the people behind the technology. Today it's Zach. Hey, Zach. And Mr. Benny. Hey, Benny.
Hi, how's it going? And Zach's just short and sweet. He just likes to go straight in and get it all done and out of the way. I love it. I love it.
Yes,
What's
yes.
up?
And it's so strange to have done this show in the studio at KKNW for years, 7.5 years. And now it's always in a little corner of my house somewhere. And I miss you, Benny. I miss seeing you in the studio.
Oh, miss you too, for sure. And we'll try to make sure we get that satellite and tower up a little bit higher so your video comes in a little bit better.
Okay.
We know you're distant, but it's all good. You're just safe and sound. That's all that matters.
Worst case scenario, we can always eliminate my video feed because you guys have seen me a number of times. You're probably tired of looking at my mug. And then just do audio only. But what we're going to do is, before we go into our quick break to check technology and make some tweaks, I just wanted to let you know that we're going to be talking about something that is really important today. We are going to be talking about anxiety. Not only anxiety for those of us who are grown up and processed so much and are still having a hard time, but anxiety for teens. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine what it must be like to be a teen right now. But we're going to go to a quick 60-second break. Stay tuned for the other side with our guest, Jodi Aman, and we're going to be talking about anxiety and how to get over it. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Christine Upchurch Show here on KKNW and Transformation Talk Radio. We are dealing with so much anxiety because life is not what we thought it should be. It's not what we thought it would be. And it's kind of overwhelming at times for those of us who've even spent decades on our conscious, psycho-spiritual journeys where we've learned to trust that there is a bigger picture behind things. Can you imagine what it's like to be an adolescent, a teenager, a young adult, where life was already a little different for them, a lot different for them because of all the technology, and then add social distancing, add fear of not being able to have a future career in the area they thought they might be able to, not knowing if their life was just going to be filled with protests and chaos. Well, our guest today is an expert at dealing with anxiety, particularly with teens. Her most recent book relates to teens. Jodi Aman, she's been a family therapist for more than 2 decades. And she shows people how to create practical miracles. I love that, even in the most difficult times such as now. As an inspirational speaker, she helps Generation Z and their parents find their diamond confidence, which I'm going to be asking her about, teaching usable tools to an anxiety survivor. Teaching usable tools to push past fear, connect with their personal agency, and expand their consciousness. She is an anxiety survivor, and so she totally gets it. As a mom of teens, she double dog gets it. Through her TEDx Wilmington talk, Calm Anxious Kids, which I've watched, and her best-selling book, You Won Anxiety Zero, Jodi is changing the way we understand the current mental health crisis. Look for her newest book right now on the shelves, Anxiety, I'm So Done With You, A Teen's Guide to Ditching Toxic Stress and Rewiring Your Brain for Happiness. And there it is, if you can see, Jodi's holding it up right now. I'd like to welcome our guest today, Jodi Aman. Hey, Jodi.
Thank you.
It's so nice to talk to a fellow Wilmington TEDx talk survivor, thriver.
Oh, it's the most wonderful, the most wonderful TEDx venue, isn't it?
It
TEDx
is, it
Wilmington. They just know
is.
what they're doing, and just wonderful, wonderful people. So
Yes. And I think at this point, they're no longer doing more. Uh, but for me, I was sharing something that was a very vulnerable truth that I had never shared widely. And so it just felt like a safe place. And doing a TEDx is very different. So, when I watched yours, I thought you did a great job and I learned something from that.
thank
Uh,
you.
okay. So, first of all, I want to understand how, as a family therapist, you ever got interested in anxiety.
Well, as a family therapist, they're dealing with it all the time. So many people are experiencing such trouble and such hardship and such overwhelm right now. And it's actually been increasing. I've been doing this work for 2 decades and it's getting worse. It's getting worse for all ages, but especially it's getting worse for our young people. We see the statistics of anxiety, depression. I was just sitting with a chair of our our biggest psychiatric clinic in Rochester, and he said 25% of young people under 18 are on a psychotropic medication.
Oh
25%.
my gosh.
It's just really, really increasing, and suicide rates are increasing. So we really need to, there is something to do, and we really need to do it.
So, are you approving of that approach of the pharmaceutical approach to dealing with anxiety in general?
Well, I see it as a tool because medications, they do save lives, and so they're an important piece of the puzzle. But when people
Uh,
think that, and I talk about this in my book, when people think that they need it, it disconnects them with their own skills and abilities. And I think there's a lot in our culture that is disconnecting us with our own skills and abilities. And so if you frame the medication in a different way, like thinking about it as a tool, first of all, less of us would take it. It wouldn't be
mhm,
that, we are a culture of wanting a really quick fix. And so
sure.
people do the medicine because it's a quick fix. We don't want
Mm,
to do the work. But unfortunately, that culture of wanting a quick fix is also the
yeah.
same culture as decreasing our connection with our own personal agency. And that's why we don't have very robust mental health in our
Mhm,
culture. If we were in
yeah.
touch with our own skills and our own resilience and our own abilities, we'd be much more robust.
Mhm. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that technology before we get into COVID and the additional stress that is put upon teens right now. What is
Yeah.
it about technology that adds to stress?
Well, this is I outline this in my TEDx Wilmington talk, but I talk about how this generation has had a device in their hand since about seventh grade or ninth grade, right? So they've had it from a younger age than any other generations have had access to the internet with all of these messages. And one research study said, from Common Media, says that they get 4,000 messages a day, kids. And probably it's increasing in the last couple of months because they're actually on their phone a lot more during
Right.
the COVID pandemic. And so 4,000 messages a day. And I really think that there's these three categories of messages that are perpetuating the idea that people are out of control. Now,
Mm,
feeling out of control is a hallmark of anxiety. Anxiety wants you to feel out of
okay.
control. Anxiety is feeling out of control, right? And so the
Okay.
messages are the three kinds are: one is this comparison culture. We're comparing our backstage mess to somebody else's highlight reel, what they're going to post on social media. And so we're always going to find ourselves inadequate if we do that. So that's
Mhm.
just much more prevalent. I mean, the result, we've always had this comparison culture. It's just much more in our face.
Yeah.
And then
And
two is,
I that's even true for adults. And I think about
oh yeah.
teens, they're going through that stage where they sort of shift from connecting or identifying with the tribe of the family to identifying the tribe with their peers. So it's probably even the stakes are even higher for those who are teenagers in terms of how they present themselves and how they are viewed on social media.
Right. So the sense of the needing to belong, or having the sense like wondering if you belong and trying to figure out where you belong, what your purpose is and who you are and what you're all about is, so this is what we're going through when we're teenagers. We're needing to go through this process. So these were particularly sensitive to the comparison. We're particularly sensitive to all these things. And that's why, it's hitting them a little bit harder. But yes, for sure, all ages, like all my peers, I'm middle aged, but all my peers are struggling with the same thing. It's in
Yeah.
fact that comparison culture from being online so much is really affecting how we see ourselves. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
you just double down. So the second
Okay.
message is all this violence that we're seeing, or all this divisiveness and arguing
Right.
that we're seeing online. So for online, a lot, or we have these messages all the time, either news or our news feed in our social media. We're seeing that there's so much against each other. There's so much antagonistic, and there's violence, random violence, and this makes us
Mhm.
feel really out of control.
Mhm.
Because
And
it would, yeah,
I'd
go
like to
ahead.
add something to that because it seems to me that um, even as an adult, viewing some of what's going on between some of the protests and violence there, to police brutality, to just like these strange things that either we didn't occur in our country before, some of them, and some of them have been happening for a long time, and so it's illuminating. And as an adult, I'm having a heck of a time processing that.
Yeah,
How
there's a
does
lot of
that
this
how do
vicarious trauma
teens
happening.
yeah, so how do teens process that?
They just feel increasingly out of control, or that their activity doesn't matter. Now, our brain was developed to, if we were in a stressful situation, we were in the stressful situation, so we would be
Right.
using those hormones that are triggered to respond to the situation. Now we're like on our couch or in our bed, whatever, and we can't do anything. So the hormones just make us feel even more helpless. And when I say hormones, I mean the adrenaline, right? The stress
Right.
hormone of adrenaline. And, we feel even more helpless, and it doubles down. Our brain's like, okay, we're not okay. We're helpless. We got to just
Uh-huh.
pump out some more.
Yeah.
And so so this randomness that we're seeing, or the message that all of this is random,
Mhm.
is very scary, and all this is increasing. So yeah,
Right.
we've never been safer. I mean, I don't want to say that for, there is some marginalized communities that have always been unsafe, but overall in the
Of
world
course.
there's less war going on. That doesn't minimize that there is some still, but there's
Mhm.
less war going on than ever in human history, but it looks like more because we see it more.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the third category that creates the stress?
This is my favorite one because this is what we really don't see. The first two people understand and see, and like, yeah, it's a problem for everybody. But the
Yeah.
last one is, we are encultured with our commercialism to that quick
Mm.
fix, like that you deserve stuff just because you're you, or this immediate gratification. And so when you
Mhm.
think about, we deserve immediate gratification when we're not immediately gratified, which is most of the time, then
Uh-huh.
it hits us at our sense of worth. So when we're
Ah.
not able to be immediately gratified, we think it's a worth issue. And it's not necessarily cognitive, but it feels like that in our belief, in our heart. It feels like there's something wrong with but we don't know what it is. We feel like we're unworthy for some reason, and we're not really sure why, so that we can't do anything. Again, all of these things are disconnecting us with our own skills and abilities. And I see, like, there's a
Uh-huh.
lack of cause and effect. Like, we don't see how we do something to make something happen. We're losing that
Uh-huh.
idea. So kids are feeling like they have no skills and not able to do. So life is really scary. Life is really
Right.
scary when you think there's nothing that you could do. And how are you going to handle anything bad if that's the case?
Mhm.
This is
And
why
I
anxiety
think
is so bad.
and I think about COVID, and it's this invisible enemy. So it's not even okay, the police brutality or the drive-by shooting that people might be able to watch out for and change their behavior in a significant way in order to hopefully avoid that. But with COVID, it's everywhere. And some say it travels through the atmosphere, and there's some controversy about whether in and of itself it's really bad. There's some things relating to pollution and stuff, but regardless of what it is, it's causing illness, death, and it seems to be kind of random in some ways. And that must add a whole other layer of fear when you can't see the so called enemy.
Well, the young people are really not even looking at all that. They're not even looking at that. I don't think it's really random. We know that it hits minority cultures a higher percentage, and it's
Yeah.
really unfortunate. I mean, that's just the devastating thing. And there is some people who I don't know if I agree with that. There is something we could do to change those things. Those things are problems culturally, and so that feels out of control. But for kids, the biggest consequence for young people from this COVID pandemic is the isolation, and the
Yeah.
isolation and lack of being able to have activities. So they lost their purpose because they lost
Mhm.
activities, they lost connection, they lost their community, they lost the routines, and we need a
Uh-huh.
routine to make us feel good. That's lost. We lost like novelty because every day is sort of the same. And so
Right.
there's just so many, and then they lost like things they're looking forward to, so they don't even have that. They
Yeah.
lost a lot of activities that used to be creative, and those creativities, like they build the robustness of that sense of
Mhm.
self. And so their confidence is tanking. The isolation
Mm.
is really hurting them. I think that's much worse because yes, they know that there's this thing going on, but the kids I
Mhm.
know are not reading the articles about the risks of the illness. They're not, and they're not reading. They're
Interesting.
just like
Okay.
it's just like they just block that all out.
Yeah.
But they are still being devastated during this time because it's so unusual. If they haven't learned, right, to put their
Mhm.
own routine into place because they've always had the
Right.
routine and the structure of the life. They haven't learned to, I have to make things happen. And so
Yeah.
in the long run, it'd be good for them when they learn this now. But they really, most of my message when I'm on radio and TV, I really want people to take their life back in a way and
Mhm.
decide like I need a
Mhm.
creative project, I need a sense of purpose, I need a routine.
Mhm.
This would be really important for them to come out of this actually even better than they were going in.
Mhm. I in, my Seattle area community, I really loved what they did because they realized that the seniors weren't gonna have graduation, right? At least not in the usual way.
Yeah.
And so people got together and there was this huge parade of cars, some of them decorated, some of them honking horns to celebrate. And I love that because that was a creative solution to somehow shift something to a safer venue, but still to allow that expression of joy and pride for getting through high school.
Yeah, exactly, right, just to mark the occasion, and I love there's been a lot of creativity, the drive-by birthday parties and the drive-by
Yes.
graduations, and,
Uh-huh.
that was a creative way to do that. Not all communities have cars like that and could do that, but
Mhm.
there is some workarounds that people have done, and that is actually, people who are engaging and trying to do these
Mhm.
workarounds or starting new projects, they're doing better than
Mhm.
people who are kind of paralyzed and frozen in this
Uh-huh.
time. We could
So tell
understand
me,
that
yeah,
phrasing, but
yeah.
yeah.
So you talked about the importance of creativity for teens. And when I think about their routines and their normal routines, pre-COVID and working hard at the studies, what is it that what ways are they typically creative and how can they shift to embrace creativity now?
Well, I think overall, our young people are less and less creative. I think that has to do with, having the phone in their hands and being able to consume content to spend their time instead of having to create something for themselves. There's a difference between
Right.
kids who are creating content for the internet and the kids who are just consuming it. And the kids who are
Uh-huh.
creating and are doing better because it really is developing that prefrontal cortex. Anytime you're involved in anything creative, you're really developing and
Uh-huh.
stimulating your prefrontal cortex. Your anxiety is going to go down and your depression is going to go down because it
Mhm.
pulls you out of the amygdala, and that's an important piece to it. And so
Mhm.
the creativity also gives you a sense of purpose. It builds your sense of confidence. And
Mhm.
it's something to do, like our brains want to solve problems. It's evolved for 2 million years, our brain,
Yeah.
to solve problems. And if we're home all day with nothing to do, with the luxury of just getting food from the kitchen, there's nothing
Mhm.
to solve. So our brain starts to create problems like no one
Mhm.
likes
Mhm.
me, and nobody wants to spend time with me, and I have no friends. And those are kind of, then you have to figure those out, and
Mhm.
that really could spiral down negativity. But if you gave the brain something to engage in, some
Mhm.
problems to solve that are good. Creativity is really problem solving. Because if you're going to make something, you're like, okay, what do I put on this side? What do I put on this side? You're making
Uh-huh.
decisions, right? That problem solving is your brain needs it to feel charged up. And what I see is
Mhm.
right now, a lot of teens are just exhausted. They're really unmotivated. They're really exhausted. Actually, adults are the same way, right?
Yeah.
And we think it's because we're filtering a lot of stuff, but I think that it's a lack of having problems to solve in your brain. And so the lack of the stimulation to that prefrontal cortex is exhausting us. And if we had things to
Mhm.
solve, it actually charges us up. It actually invigorates
Right.
us. It makes us
Yeah.
feel like we mean something and we
Yeah.
belong here instead of like untethered. And so that's really the message I want to get out the most.
And I know that Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about how if you do the same things over and over again, then the neural pathways kind of stay stagnant. They stay in the same pattern, which actually starts to age the body.
Mhm.
And that we need to do things differently on a day to day basis in order to kind of create those neural pathways. So it sounds like you're kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think routine is really important. So it's really, our mind, if we don't have a routine, our mind's trying to, it's clutter for our mind and we have a routine, it doesn't worry about that. But at the same time, we like really need novelty. We really need novelty in our days. And that's what a lot of people have been missing during this time is some
Right.
novelty because that stimulates you, that
Mhm.
invigorates you, gives you energy. And so exactly what he's saying.
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I never really thought about creativity as problem solving, but there's that important piece of it of how you put things together. And yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, if you organize a closet, if you clean out your closet, you have to decide what am I
Uh,
gonna do with this? What am I gonna do with that? How am I
mhm,
gonna set this up so it's neater in here and I have more access? Like
mhm.
decision making is problem solving and it's good
Yeah.
for you. Those things are good for you. So if
Uh-huh.
you have those kind of problem solving and things that are really not overwhelming problems, they're not like
Hmm.
difficulty, they're not troubles. But they're making decisions, that's gonna be really good and invigorating.
Okay. So what do you suggest for the teens who are stuck at home, doing the same old? What's going to help them with their anxiety?
Well, first of all, they can get my book, right? So it's an activity book. There's a lot of activities that are tried and true that I've used for 20 years in there, really helping them understand anxiety. I think the first thing is like we don't get what it is, and the mystery of it gives it a lot of power. So
Mhm,
understanding what it is, what it's from, right? It's not an illness, it
mhm,
comes from our culture. And really understand how that works really takes the pressure off or the negative self-judgments off. And that makes all the difference. But right now, during COVID and this pandemic and social distancing, we need community. So you need to
mhm.
be talking to people if it's outside or online. They
Uh,
need that routine, like I said, which includes like sleeping good and movement, right? Getting some exercise
uh-huh.
in, eating well. And then creativity, we've covered that,
Sure.
and then novelty. So those are the pieces that everybody needs to do a sense of purpose. I'm sorry, sense of purpose kind of is within all of them, isn't it? And if we don't have a sense of purpose, we don't feel like we belong and we feel really untethered. And so kids
Mhm.
need like goals for this summer, a project that they've never
Right.
done before. They need something to work towards, something to make, something to do.
Mhm.
And it's great if you do it for somebody else or do it with somebody else. That's the extra bonus.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. We're going to go to a quick break, but when we return, I'm going to have you address the anxiety of masks, how that affects that age group, and some of the ways that we parents, grandparents, and teachers can help the teens. Stay tuned for more with Jodi Aman. Viva to Benny. Welcome back to the Christine Upchurch Show and the vibration of change here on KKNW AM 1150 in Seattle, Transformation Talk Radio around the world, and of course, Facebook Live on Transformation Talk Radio's page and Christine Upchurch professional page. I'm talking today with Jodi Aman, and she is an anxiety expert. she's experienced it personally, and she has helped families and teens deal with anxiety for decades now. Okay, so one of the things I want to talk about is the issue of masks, and not from, I think that there are some different perspectives on it, not just in terms of philosophical, but there's actually some medical differences. And I'm not talking about that. We've got mandates to wear masks in a lot of different places. And so teens are in a situation where they too have to wear masks. I know with little kids, I've got grand nieces and a grand nephew who have like been practicing wearing masks, and they're terrified when they see adults in masks. You know, Historically, if somebody's in a mask, they're what are they? They're holding up a store or they're trying to hide themselves. Since we take so many cues from our face and we're covering so much of the face, how do you see this as affecting teens?
Well, a lot of teens I see are getting together outside, so they're not using them when they're outside. And
Uh,
I don't know. I have to say that it's streamlined. It's easier for them than it is for a lot of the adults I see, to be honest, because kids are adaptable. Kids are
uh-huh,
really adaptable. Even young kids are really adaptable, and
uh-huh,
there's more anxiety I feel like coming from adults. Um, because it's coming from adults about wearing masks, like feeling like they can't breathe well or not really liking their face
sure.
covered. And so that, that creates a lot of anxiety. And so they feel like they can't do it.
Uh-huh.
But I really haven't, from my teen clients, I really haven't heard a lot of complaints, to be honest. And that might be
Oh,
because
that's
they're
good.
not going to many places that they have to wear masks. They're in their own
Right.
houses or they're
Uh-huh.
outside with some friends. And so they're not wearing them that often. Even if they go
Yeah.
to the coffee shop, once they're out in the seats outside, they could take their masks off to drink that
Hmm.
coffee. And so,
Right.
they're not really doing it. It's not like they have a job where they have to wear it 8 hours a day, unless they
Yeah.
do have a part-time job, and then they're doing
Yeah.
that, but they're choosing to do that because they wanna have that job and have that income. And so I
Hmm.
really don't see it as sparking a lot of anxiety, but I'm sure in
It's great.
individual cases, like, some kids are afraid. Kids are adaptable, so once it becomes normal, then it's gonna be fine. When it's
Hmm.
unusual, then it's like, "This is weird," and then once you, start to like, my son was home for a long time. I was the only one who shopped in the beginning of stay-at-home orders, and so the
Sure.
first time he's 20, so we were all home but me for, like, weeks, no one went out, and then so the first time he went to a store, all masks, he was like, "This is bizarre," it's like it's
Mhm.
new
Yeah.
and it's different, but then you get used to it really, really quickly, and that's what I think it's important, like,
Mhm.
we are highly adaptable. If we thought that we could do this, we'd be like, "No way we could do this," and then we do
Mhm.
it. It's like we
Uh-huh.
don't that's why anxiety is so rampant, that's why it's such a huge problem, is, like, we think that we don't have the skills for things, and then
Mhm.
we absolutely do. We don't know it till because we
Mhm.
don't really have, almost like it's like, I was meeting with this psychiatry chair earlier today, and he was like, definitely people are struggling a lot more.
Mhm.
Like, life is harder. And I said, but yeah, we're struggling more, but life is actually easier. And I think that's sometimes part of the problem. And
Mhm.
some of us managing some of these challenges that we had actually is building some resilience in us because we're connecting and seeing our skills like we haven't seen in a while.
Uh-huh. So I think about some of the upside of the stay-at-home orders for those who have a secure home where there's not like child abuse, that sort of thing. It's I think it's probably helping to connect families more deeply. And I think about the teen years as sort of flying by because, the kids come and go. They're either in their room studying like crazy, or they're out with their friends, or interacting with their friends in the home. Do you see a positive upside to the stay at home for the teens?
Well, it depends on the family. So some families are active and they've tried to do novel stuff, and then some families just watch TV all the time or something. So it
Hmm.
depends on the family if they're active or they're not. And there's a
Hmm.
culture, it's like a family culture to be active or look for something new or look for something creative, right? And
Hmm.
then there's some families that don't have that culture, for a lot of different reasons. Because there's just some families who are more active than other families. So that does affect the teen. If a teen's staying in the room the whole time, I'd be really, really worried. They
Yeah.
should be interacting. If they're not interacting with anybody at all, this is really dangerous. It's not good for our psyches. We're social beings. We need to be
Mhm.
around people. But families who are,
Right.
some families I talked to, it's like I spent so much time with my kids that I never thought I'd have. It's been such a gift. There's
Yeah.
so for a lot of people it's been a gift. Of course, then there's some people who are, have had a shelter at home with like toxic family members, and it's been really
Yeah.
difficult, or
Yeah.
not having enough food or whatever. And so there's definitely a whole gamut, and it's hard to really overgeneralize, but because so many experiences are so different here. But
That
sure,
makes
I mean, a
sense.
lot of people felt like they had a gift of having more
Mhm.
time together. You're in the car less,
Mhm.
right? Running around a lot
Yeah.
less, and so everybody has been together more, and maybe eating healthier because you're making food now, and instead of
Right.
running around like grabbing something between practice or something like that.
Yeah. I feel like I'll be remiss if I don't mention this. In what ways do we need to be concerned about anxiety symptoms and signs when with our teens? I think
Like, you're
about
asking when we should think
depression,
about getting help,
depression.
or?
No, no, I think about depression and people worrying about suicide. We be concerned if teens are particularly anxious that they may become suicidal?
Well, sometimes, not often, that usually comes with more of a depression. And
Okay,
sometimes depression comes with anxiety because it stinks so
right.
bad to feel that
Yeah.
suffering all the time. And so you
Hmm.
get really depressed about having to live like that. And so depression does come with anxiety, comes with the context, but also anxiety and depression both come out of context of relationships,
Uh-huh.
of disappointments, of things that happen. And so when your child's going through like a breakup, or being bullied or being left out of a
Hmm.
friend group, those are times that we really want to keep our eye out and really listen
Hmm.
to them and have them really
Uh-huh.
share all the things that they're feeling and thinking, so that we could prevent something like that happening. We'd be in the know. And I always tell
Uh-huh.
parents, like, consistently learn from your kids what they're doing each day and how they think about their friends, because if you don't talk to them for a really long time, it's too much work to update you. But if they just
Oh,
have to update
right.
you about a day, it's like so much
Uh-huh.
easier. So if you're up to date on what's going on with their friends and their romantic relationships, then
Hmm.
you'll be updated regularly, and you'll be right there to see something if there's some red flags or there's some trouble. And I
Hmm.
think that's like the best place for parents to be, really.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, before we go any further, I want you to share with our listening and viewing audience about your website and what it is you offer.
Yeah, so I have, I'm a blogger and a YouTuber, so I have lots of free videos on there. But I also have courses. I have 3 courses for teens that are brand spanking new. So I
Okay.
have a teen confidence course. I have a course on teen building your intuition and trust in
Uh-huh.
yourself, and then I have one about relationships, having healthy relationships in teenage years. So I'm really
Oh,
excited about
great.
those. But I have like 16 online programs that are for self help and personal development.
Mhm.
And I teach people how to use their intuition, how to develop their intuition. And I think that's the most powerful way we could recognize our sovereign power. And we could start, like, this radio station is about vibration, right? So you can
Mhm.
vibrate higher and really connect with the powers that are around us
Mhm.
to really be more successful and happier and filled with joy in this life. And I
Right.
didn't mention this about the book to you, but the whole I'm an energy healer as well. So when I
Uh-huh.
was writing the book, I did a lot of ceremony around the book to really vibrate it at a healing energy. So
Sure.
even when kids are reading it, they're feeling, even if they don't read the whole thing, but if they're holding it in their hands, they're going to get some of that energy that I put in the book. That's going to make a difference.
Sure.
If you think about it, if we really help this generation, and then they grow up and they have kids, you know epigenetics teaches us that we have 14 generations of trauma in our DNA, and we could
Uh-huh.
heal that. Actually, epigenetics means genes change. So when we heal
Sure.
ourselves from that trauma, and we heal ourselves of our anxiety, some of our anxiety comes from that trauma, right? If we
Mhm.
heal that, we're not passing it along. So you
Yeah.
could think about how we could really, really change the world if we really heal this generation. First of all, we're saving them decades of bad relationships and
Sure.
anxiety and low self-esteem, right? and it's easy to do. I could do it. And also, we're creating this cleaner DNA that doesn't pass along
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
trauma. And when you're not weighed down by the trauma, you're kinder, you're more
Uh-huh.
connected. We lift each other up, we care
Mhm.
more. There's not that fear that makes us try to get power over other people, which is most of the conflict going on in the world.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I love the fact that the trauma getting passed down through DNA has um, been evident through scientific research. So it's not this woo
Mhm.
woo concept. It,
Mm-mm.
it really does pass down from generation to generation. Okay, so with your programs and with this book where you've got exercises for the teens to go through, what age range are you really gearing it towards?
Well, I would say Generation Z. So, maybe 12, maybe not be interested in reading the book. So maybe about 12, 13, but all the way through mid 20s. I
Okay,
don't swear in the book so that parents would buy it for those younger teens. But,
sure.
if I was writing the same book for college students, maybe I'd do that just to be a little more relatable. But I think
Uh-huh.
college students and actually adults are getting so much out of this book already. So
Mm,
parents to help their kids, but also adults to help themselves, because I
yeah.
explain anxiety. Really, anxiety works on us all the same way. It works on
Mm,
us the same way it works on a teenager. And so the same, we could use these things as well. So it's really for all ages, but I'm speaking in the kind of speak of Generation Z.
okay. So you mentioned the A word, adults, and I think about the anxiety that we're experiencing right now. What advice do you have for us?
Well, my biggest advice is this is temporary. This is
Mhm.
temporary. And usually, the adults are caregivers of other people, either our parents or
Right.
our young people, right? And so
And sometimes both, yes.
sometimes both at the same time. So it's a really stressful time. We're in the middle. And so if we understood for ourselves, if we did our own work and knew how to trust ourselves, then we could teach it in both ways. Right.
Mhm.
And also if we knew that this was temporary and that we're going to make it, and we knew that we had the skills and abilities to do it, then we could model that.
Right.
I think I always tell parents, like, what do I tell my kids? Tell them they're not going to leave you like this. Tell them
Mhm.
that this is temporary and there's a lot of things you could do. You could get totally better. We could cure
Right.
you of this anxiety. And first of all, you have to believe it and do your own work for yourself too. And I
Sure.
explain why I believe that anxiety is completely curable in the book.
Mhm.
And that's from 20 years as a mental health professional. So it's not just I'm woo woo and blah, blah. No, no, no. It is comes from our culture, and we could undo it. We could unlearn it.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more. Why is it and how is it curable?
Well, actually, so you had mentioned in the beginning that I had experienced anxiety myself, and most of us have
Mhm.
actually. And sometimes we come into
Mhm.
helping professional professions because we had our own health crisis. And
Yep.
so I had anxiety for 20 years, from age 5 to my mid 20s. And I noticed, I'm going to fast forward through the story. My story's on YouTube, so you could look up Jodi Aman, my story, my anxiety story. But, I realized in my 20s that anxiety was learned, like that I learned it. And so
Mhm.
I really
Mhm.
committed myself, body, mind, and soul, to figuring out how to unlearn it and how to get rid of it completely. And so I developed a 6-step process actually.
Uh-huh.
And the 6 steps in all my programs in my books, I go through the 6 steps, but the 6 steps are really understand it biologically, to take the mystery out of it, right?
Mhm.
Understand the lies. Number two, understand the lies that it tells. So you could really do an expose and understand what anxiety is saying, because it sounds true, but there's
Uh-huh.
ways of us to know that it's not, and then we don't believe it, and it doesn't have any
Okay.
power then. What's different about my method is that I deconstruct anxiety. Most other
Uh-huh.
methods that help with anxiety are teaching you skills and teaching
Sure.
you how to, calm yourself. But my method, we deconstruct anxiety first. So the one and two
Okay.
is deconstructing anxiety. Then the third one is building your skills and knowledges, building your
Mhm.
skills and abilities, really getting in touch with those. And number four is forgiving yourself, because like
Mm.
it's our negative self judgments and our not trusting ourselves that makes us not think that we could handle anything. So we really have to make peace with ourselves. We can't cure
Right.
anxiety unless we have peace with ourselves. And that's why teach people intuition, because we all have intuition. And really,
Sure.
it's about trusting yourself and being able to trust this life in the world. And then the
Mhm.
fifth one is strategic affirmation. So, how to change those beliefs. We have to change
Uh-huh.
our beliefs because that's how we heal. And then
Right.
number 6 is practicing these self-care things that we all know, sleeping good,
Mhm.
eating good, exercising, meditation. So
Sure.
that's number 6. And so you combine all those, life is good. Like you could really sustain and maintain your happiness. And in this book, I really go through like the science of it, like the science of happiness and why we
Mhm.
have to do like how much control we actually have. Because there's so many thought
Sure.
leaders that say, "Oh, you don't have control, like just surrender."
Uh-huh.
That doesn't help someone with anxiety. We just don't want to hear that, right? We
Uh-huh.
want to, but I teach like you have 100% of control over the thing that
Mhm.
matters. And let me show you how. Let me show you how it breaks down. And,
Yeah.
and I think that's really
And
powerful. I think this really can change things.
and
So,
I love the fact that you bring in the intuitive piece too, because I think that that's so essential. And and so it's this walking on both sides of the street where you have control, you get to make choices, you get to write your story how you want to write it, but also surrender to the flow of the information and to that connection, that soul connection to either the quantum field, the divine, whatever you want to call it. And that allows us to have the best of both worlds.
exactly. Trust. Trust
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
opposite of anxiety. So we build
Oh, I like
trust.
that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, anxiety is not trusting, like feeling helpless, feeling out of control. And the
Mhm.
opposite is trust. We build trust and we build a robust mental health.
Mhm. Okay, so we're talking about adults right now, and I think about the polarization in our society right now. Um, oh gosh, I barely get onto Twitter these days because it makes me crazy. Um, People don't have open discussions and talk about you know point A versus point B, and let's see if there's a place to meet in the middle. It's like, I can't believe you believe point B. I'm a point A, or I'm going to shun you. I'm going to shame you. Really, how do we deal with the anxiety that can come from this particular thing?
Again, we have to understand the platform. So, the social media platforms engagement is the point, right? So these things that these polarizing ideas that people post and then having people complain and then there's a lot of what engagement. So they
Mhm.
are going to be in your feed a lot more because the social media agency, whatever platform you're talking about, is like,
Sure.
oh, this is engagement. Let's show more. And so that's why we see it so much. And we think it's like, it almost looks like it's much, much worse than it is. I mean, I shouldn't say that it almost seems like it is. It looks like it's much worse than it actually is.
Mhm.
And so when we're not connecting person to person and realizing it's when you connect in person to someone, it doesn't feel sometimes there's less of it.
Mhm.
Right, there's less of that polarizing. When you look
Right.
online and you see all that, you're like, "Oh my gosh, everybody is going crazy." But not everybody's going crazy. It's a very small percent, but in our news
Mhm.
feed, it's a huge percent. So it could really increase our anxiety. So one, get off there.
Yeah.
Take a
Yeah.
break. That there's no help in looking at those comments going back and forth and those fights like what good is it for us?
Mhm.
It doesn't help, it doesn't change
Right.
what we think, it's not helping us in any way. It's just freaking us out. Like
Mhm.
things are bad. There is a lot of problems, but
Right.
not as bad as it seems on there. And so I think that's an
Mhm.
important thing to know. I'm not saying
Yeah.
things aren't bad. I'm not like, well, I don't want to, but
Right.
it is bad, but it's not that bad. And
Mhm.
so be with people.
That makes sense.
That's my suggestion.
Yeah, and that, of course, I mean, with the stay-at-home orders in some states and the social distancing, it can be challenging. But I went to a Zoom birthday party the other day, birthday celebration for Kyle, who supports this show, and she also supports me bringing my work forward, and that was kind of a kick. And it's like she lives on the other side of the country. I don't normally go to her birthday parties, and then here was this opportunity to connect. And I think about how if we realize that so many of us are coming from the same place of trying to deal with a stressful situation, wanting to help ourselves, our families, and our communities, that it's an opportunity to connect more deeply as opposed to a time for polarization.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well said.
Okay. So do you have any message in the next 3 minutes or so, a final message for adults and or children dealing with anxiety?
Well, I just want to let people know again that this is temporary. This is something that it could hit anybody, and it could you could get rid of it. Like there is potential to get absolutely rid of it in your life, to live free
Mhm.
from anxiety. And so that is, if you don't believe that's possible, and I know there's a lot of mental health professionals in your life maybe that told you that it wasn't possible, but that's not true. It's absolutely possible. And it's only when you believe it's possible, then you're going to take action. If you thought you couldn't get better, you don't do anything, to try to
Yeah,
get better, because what's the point? You're not going to get better. And so if
right.
you feel different and alone and isolated, it's the worst thing. But if you thought, hey, this is temporary, I could get better, the people who believe they could get better. And
Mhm.
so if you switch that, if you like come on this journey with me, come watch my videos and get help, get my books, get my books, then you'll see that you could get over your anxiety completely. And like, the life is short. You know, we
Uh-huh.
we have stuff to do. We have great potential. Our young people have great potential, so much more than they know right now. And I just want to tell
Mhm.
each and every one of them that they're amazing. You're amazing. Parents have it really hard right now, and I feel you, and I know how hard you're working. And I guess I just want to encourage people. I think that's what we need most of all right now, right, is encouragement.
Yeah. And one of the things that concerns me is that, in a sense, we've paused, in a variety of ways, um, and yet this is our life right now, and we need to thrive, or we're missing out on a chunk of our lives. And at the age that I'm at, I know that that's a very significant thing. With younger people, it's probably really hard because they're often more in the moment, but it's going to go by in an instant. Um, but we have to live our lives in a way that satisfies us. It gives us purpose, gives us direction.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so what's your website?
JodiAman.com,
Uh,
JodiAman.com. I'm on all social media. I do a live coaching session on Facebook every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern.
uh,
So yeah, so
and
come to my website, find me.
and where are you on Facebook?
It's at Jodi Aman Love. So JodiAman. And so it's Jodi Aman Live Happier is my Facebook page. So yeah, so come
Okay.
by on Mondays. You could ask me questions live, and I could help you out.
Mm,
And I still work with people privately. So, if
mhm,
you need some extra support from someone who knows what they're doing, hit
uh-huh.
me up.
And as a therapist who works in a particular state, can you do distance sessions across states? Are you allowed to do that?
A licensing's different for each state. So it is
Uh-huh.
state by state what the rules
Mhm,
are. And so
mhm,
I just look at each state's. I help people all around the world, and so that's different if it's out of the states. But there's several states
mhm,
that just let me know, and then I could tell you if I could help you or not.
mhm. Yeah. And I imagine if you separate out coaching versus therapy, that the coaching is probably fine, right?
Yeah, it depends on the
Yeah.
state if I'm licensed. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so some most states are fine. It's just a couple that I have to be careful of.
Mhm.
But yeah, let me know and see what I could do to help.
Okay. I want to thank you for joining us here today, and for talking about this important topic, because anxiety is rampant right now. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Christine.
And I want to thank all of you for being here. And I know that the video may be a little wonky, but you know, I'm in nature. What can I say? Very soon, I'll probably be back to really good internet and be missing the nature. So thank you for joining us here today. I invite you to step into your vibration of change. Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you'd like to empower yourself to step further into your vibration of change, please visit my website at christineupchurch.com